University of Nebraska-Lincoln. The SNR Coffee and Conservation Hour is designed to help university faculty and staff and state, federal, and NGO employees expand their knowledge and awareness of natural resource conservation efforts across the state and beyond. The typical structure of this meeting is approximately 15 to 20 minutes for the presenter, followed by 40 to 45 minutes of discussion with the audience. We hope that you find this meeting beneficial as we partner together as a conservation community to achieve landscape level conservation success. And just several reminders before we get started. Last month's presentation with John Denton was recorded and available on the SNR seminar page and the Awesome Lab website. Next month's speaker is June 29th with Brian Teeter with Pheasants Forever. He's the prescribed fire coordinating wildlife biologist. And we welcome your feedback on today's meeting, as well as general input on the SNR Coffee and Conservation Hour. So please check in the chat towards the end of this meeting for a brief survey. And before we introduce Nathan, I just want to let Mark make a comment about something we're working on with this.
Hi. So just wanted to let you know that there is a listserv for, I'm assuming it's a newsletter for Coffee and Conservation. And you can go to there. Andy's listed the website where you can go there. You'll go and click on a button, and then that'll take you to add your email address. What we found happening a lot is there's a process that the listserv sends you an email confirming that your interest is actually there. And for most people in Gmail and even in university mail, it's getting stuck into spam. So make sure when you sign up, if you don't get an email within 2 or 3 minutes, I would say, check your spam filters and make sure it's not hidden in there, because that's happened to a lot of us. It just seems to get there regardless of which newsletter we've been signing up for or things like that. So just double check your spam filter, where your junk mail goes, and that, to make sure that the confirmation email gets to you, because you actually have to click on a link in the confirmation email to complete the subscription process.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So today's speaker is Nathan Pfluger. His presentation is titled Diversifying a Corn and Soybean Landscape. Throughout his undergraduate career at Chadron State College, he interned at an agronomy company over the summers and volunteered for different wildlife opportunities throughout the school year. Upon graduating with his Bachelor's of Science degree in Rangeland and Wildlife Management, he took a field and lab technician job with the University of Texas at Austin, which focused on switchgrass research with the end goal of being biofuel production. After a year as a technician, he started his Master's of Science degree in agronomy, range, and forage science at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where he focused on a cover crop and annual forage production across Nebraska's precipitation gradient. After receiving his graduate degree, he began working with Pheasants Forever within Nebraska as their precision ag coordinator. Nathan truly enjoys his position because he gets to work with producers with an agriculturally dominated landscape, where he utilizes cover crops to diversify the landscape to benefit wildlife while simultaneously benefiting the landowner's soil health and overall operation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nathan. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan, for the introduction. Again, my name is Nathan Pfluger, and I'm the Precision Ag Coordinator for Pheasants Forever. And this afternoon, my presentation is titled Diversifying a Corn and Soybean Landscape. So jumping right into it here, my focus area consists of 9 counties in eastern Nebraska, and those counties include Merrick, Polk, Butler, Hamilton, York, Seward, Clay, Fillmore, and Saline counties, and you can see them outlined in red right there. And the reason I am focused here is because they are heavily dominated by row crop agriculture, and more specifically, corn and soybean production. Outside of those 2 commodities, there's very little diversity. And that is because the soils are productive. There's good annual precipitation, which ranges from 66 to 86 centimeters a year. And there's also the potential for irrigation, whether that be pivot irrigation or flood irrigation. And all of these factors that make the landscape productive for crops also leads to high land prices. So just for the sake of ease, I have actually just averaged the land prices across the 9 counties, just to make it easy and simple to look at here. So if a producer was looking to purchase a dry land acre within one of my 9 counties, they could expect to pay somewhere around $5,000 an acre. To rent that same acre, you're gonna look at around $185 per acre for rent. Irrigated ground is obviously going to be higher. So to purchase an acre, you're looking at around $8,000 an acre, with $272 an acre for rent. And jumping over here to this map on the left side of the screen, I like to show this because I think it does a really good job. It just showing how dominated the landscape is by cropland. So you can see that the green is actually the cropland. We do have some urbanization throughout my coverage area. There is some rangeland and riparian areas interspersed throughout, but definitely dominated by row crop agriculture. And as we go to this next slide, just keep in mind those soil rental rates there. So it's no surprise that with the productive crop ground, CRP has not been economically competitive for producers. And that is just because the rental rates are low compared to what a producer could get if they were renting row crop acres. So for instance, if a producer was looking to enroll in continuous CRP, they would go in and get their soil rental rate, which is they utilize the top 3 soils within that field to determine your soil rental rate. And then you are able to receive 90% of that soil rental rate for a continuous CRP payment. So for example, if we look at these averages here in my coverage area, if we look at Butler County, which shows on this map is the highest average, that average is $176 per acre. Which is obviously already below that $185 an acre dry land rent. And then if we're talking irrigated acres, you're looking at $270 some an acre, which is a no-brainer for a lot of producers when it comes to economics. And then when commodity prices go up, that also throws a wrench in things. And then we see land conversions out of perennial habitat or a conservation program, which is also something that we have to deal with in this coverage area. So the lack of interest in CRP in the end has forced us to explore new areas or ways that we can work with row crop producers to put a wildlife benefit on the landscape in one form or another. And that has led us to cover crops and annual forages. So for those individuals that might not be familiar with a cover crop is a crop grown between cash crops to keep the soil covered, but never to be harvested or removed from the soil. And today we see that the terms cover crop and annual forage are often used interchangeably, and a lot of producers will actually treat that cover crop as an annual forage. The thing to keep in mind is that a cover crop can be grazed or treated as an annual forage, but if you want that biomass to act like a cover crop, you need to ensure that a substantial amount of biomass is left. So you can't harvest all of the biomass that's out there. So there's definitely a give and take. And today cover crops and annual forages are planted for a variety of objectives and benefits, including grazing, obviously. But before a producer jumps into utilizing cover crops, more specifically, it's important that they have their goals and objectives laid out because that's going to factor in on what species are utilized, when the cover crop's planted and terminated, and a variety of other factors. So why Pheasants Forever and cover crops? Well, first of all, there is a need for healthy soils and clean water, which translates to healthy local communities. And with Pheasants Forever being a grassroots organization, we are deeply intertwined in those local communities. So anytime that we can implement a best management practice that's going to create healthy local communities or make those areas better, that's a no-brainer for us. Cover crops can also potentially offer a wide variety of benefits along with diversifying systems, which is obviously important for us in this specific landscape where it's heavily dominated by corn and soybean production. And then, of course, research has actually shown that pheasants will utilize cover crops if they are present on the landscape. And there's more and more research coming out all the time that shows not only pheasants, but other wildlife and pollinators can benefit from cover crops if they are on the landscape, which as we move into the future, I believe we'll start to see more and more research looking at these factors. So the term cover crop and cover crops have been around for a while. And when a producer thinks about a cover crop, they're more thinking of the soil health benefits, which is great. So everything from erosion control, keeping that ground covered, letting that root biomass of the cover crop anchor the soil, increasing soil organic carbon, which obviously has a slew of other benefits associated with it. Compaction management is another one that producers think about with taprooted species. Soil nutrient management, so utilizing legume cover crops to fix nitrogen is a possibility, but also utilizing cover crops to take up those excess nutrients to stop them from leaching through the soil profile or being lost to erosion. And a lot of those producers who we work with sit down with us because they have these different ideas in mind, which is great. But with us being Pheasants Forever, when we get over here into this other category, that's when we start thinking about biodiversity and wildlife habitat. And if we're able to sit down with that producer and plug that biodiversity and wildlife habitat component into all these other benefits that we're getting, we view it as a win for both of us, the producer and Pheasants Forever, and then the wildlife obviously as well. So how are we putting cover crops on the landscape? Well, that is through the Pathways for Wildlife program, and more specifically, the Pathway for Precision Ag Conservation component of that program. This program is a partnership program between the NRCS and Pheasants Forever and the Nebraska Game and Parks as well. It is grant funded through the Nebraska Environmental Trust. So the goal of the Precision Ag Conservation component is to work within a row crop dominated landscape and make a difference for wildlife by diversifying the landscape. So we do that through working with producers who are nervous about cover crop seed cost, operators who are looking to try new things, maybe pushing the envelope for utilizing cover crops. Maybe they're the first one in their area. Odd areas in and around crop fields. So maybe there's these small areas that historically a producer farmed and maybe their equipment's getting too big, so it doesn't really make sense, or it's more of a pain for them to farm. Isolation areas of seed corn fields are up there on top of our list. Producers looking to control erosion, the variety of soil health benefits, added forage is another area that we work with producers in. And then those producers who are interested in wildlife. And a lot of you are like, well, no duh, you would want to work with them. But a lot of producers who I sit down with are interested in wildlife, but they've never found something that works economically for their operations. So maybe that perennial habitat component just isn't paying their bills, and cover crops are going to benefit them in one way or another, or whether it be forage, and they're willing to work with us to put that wildlife benefit out there because they're receiving a benefit as well. So year one of the program was actually released and we began promoting it in March of 2019. So I would argue that's a little behind the 8 ball for the upcoming growing season. But we were able to scratch out 12 contracts, totaling a little over 1,000 acres across 4 of the 9 counties. In the beginning, we required a minimum of 3 species within the mixture and had 160 acre maximum project size. Very flexible program, not many restrictions. If we came to an agreement with a producer, we would cost share, we being Pheasants Forever, would cost share 75% of that seed mixture. The other 25% of the seed mixture, planting, termination, and how they utilize that cover crop or forage was completely up to the landowner themselves. In the fall of 2019, we ended up hosting a well-attended field day in cooperation with the NRCS, UNL On-Farm Research, and the UNL School of Natural Resources, which really set us up well moving into year 2, which was the growing season of 2020. So in year 2, we ended with 20 contracts across 8 counties, totaling a little over 2,500 acres. And the exciting thing for me is that we had multiple projects with standing cover throughout the winter and into the following spring. This is exciting from my standpoint because if a lot of you who are familiar with row crop agriculture, especially corn and soybeans, after harvest of the corn and soybean crop, there's not a lot of structure out there for wildlife to use. And that you can see that in that top left picture. That's more often than not what you would see from a harvested cornfield. And then in the bottom right here is actually a pivot corner that we worked with a producer who planted a cereal rye crop, which he took to harvest And we were able to come to an agreement with the producer to follow it up with a diverse cover crop mixture and leave that standing until the following spring. So definitely getting some structure out there on the landscape, and some forage resources for wildlife as well. And then in year 2, we actually began wildlife monitoring efforts with trail cameras, butterfly surveys, and small mammal trapping. And the reason for this is because just because we're getting these contracts out there, that's not where we want to stop. We want to make sure that we are actually benefiting wildlife at some point throughout the year. So we want to make sure we're getting the bang for our buck, I guess you'd say. So a little more on the small mammal trapping. That was done in cooperation with Mike Sherrod of the Nebraska Master Naturalist Foundation. And we wanted to answer the question, will cover crops increase small mammal species diversity, relative density, and species richness as compared to cropland? So we ended up trapping a site in Hamilton County with a 12 species cover crop mixture on it. And we compared that to the adjacent soybean field. And we utilized Sherman traps, which is live trapping. And we actually trapped in the spring and the summer. Unfortunately, we were not able to trap in the fall due to poor weather conditions. And then in the end, it is a small data set, and I realize that, but the small data set does suggest that species diversity, relative density, and species richness were higher in the cover crop plot compared to the adjacent soybean field. And then down here at the bottom, you can see that species trapped included Paramiscus maniculatus, Leucopus, and Rhythrodinomys megalotus. Again, we also conducted a butterfly survey, and again, we were interested in species richness of our cover crop site. Brian Teeter and myself conducted a 2-person survey on July 28th with sweep nets that was an hour long, where we released repeated species captured, and we captured 12 different butterfly and moth species. And at the time of our survey, the flowering cover crop species, which would be a nectar resource for different pollinators, included forage radish, flax, hairy vetch, and cowpeas. Like I said, we also utilized trail cameras. And for trail cameras, we were interested in what wildlife species are utilizing our cover crops and at what time of the year. In year 1, we actually had 6 trail cameras across a variety of other cover crop contracts. Here in the upcoming growing season, we're looking to ramp up that number. But anyways, we also had 2 time-lapse cameras to track cover crop growth and standability throughout the year. So just because we're getting this biomass out there, is it staying standing up? Is it folding over? Is it still offering a benefit to wildlife? So those are things we're trying to answer. At the end of last year, unfortunately, we didn't have any pheasant photos or quail photos, which is kind of a bummer because talking with multiple landowners, they saw pheasants out there. I heard them when I was out there on doing different monitoring and things like that. So a couple of the producers who had forage contracts actually flushed roosters and hens out of there when they were stretching hot wires, creating different paddocks. So we know they're out there. We just need to get them on camera. But nonetheless, we did get some neat pictures with the trail cameras. And then obviously down there in the bottom right, we saw something we really don't like to see out there. And for that particular side, I'm going to chalk that cat up to the reason we didn't see any pheasants or quail out there. Moving on with some of the other contracts that we had, we did have a couple marginal land conversion contracts, which was really exciting. The 4.5 acres in Hamilton County, which was in or still is in the process of transitioning into perennial habitat. The producer, when they came to us, was past the planting date for perennials. So we were able to work with them to put a diverse cover crop mixture out there to hopefully benefit wildlife throughout the year. And the reason they were transitioning it back into perennial habitat is because in 2018, the producer harvested 17 bushels an acre of corn off of it. 2019, they were unable to harvest anything. So the producer estimated that he had $350 per acre on inputs. So at that point, he was definitely losing money on those acres. So anyways, we planted that 12 species mix to benefit wildlife. And then this year, that producer is in the process of putting it back into perennial habitat. And this was, in fact, the project that we did conduct the small mammal trapping and butterfly survey on. Small grain projects are also ones that we get really excited about. More people are looking to grow cereal rye or other winter cereals for personal use or to sell as cover crops. And outside of full season cover crops and forage crops, we get our best growth here. And that is solely due to the number of growing degree days that we can take advantage of with that cover crop. So in year 2, we had 4 different contracts behind small grains, and 1 of those actually stood throughout the winter, and 3 were treated as annual forages. So there's definitely potential with small grains to get biomass out there on the landscape, which is really exciting to see. So moving into year 3 of the program, this spring, we've continued monitoring our winter cereal contracts for performance. So what kind of growth are we getting? Our producers spraying it out when the cover crop is 5 to 6 inches tall? Are they planting green into it? That's the kind of stuff that we're looking to learn there. We're going to continue with our 75% cost share on diverse cover crop mixtures. We've also added a $10 per acre payment to add small grains into their crop rotation and take it to harvest. And then if a producer follows that small grain harvest with one of our diverse cover crop mixtures, they are eligible for a $40 per acre foregone income payment if they leave that cover crop biomass standing until the following spring. And if a producer is wanting to use a portion of that cover crop biomass as a forage, we can also work that into the contract as well, and only pay them for the acres that they do leave standing. So like in the beginning, very flexible program, easy to work with producers in, which we've got great feedback about. So obviously going into year 3, we're going to continue that wildlife monitoring through different techniques, and we're actually hoping to ramp up different things like the trail camera surveys, and we're also looking at some soil health type stuff too, as far as infiltration rates and different things like that. And then the full season cover crop incentive, which came on a little late. This is the newest incentive that we were offering. And this is only for producers who meet select criteria. So the producer must have cropland within 2 miles of any WMA, ASEP, CRP, or WRP, so any good perennial habitat. And these are going to be handled on a case-by-case basis because we're not going to treat a grass waterway that is 100% brome as good perennial habitat. So we go out and check every one of these sites, but if they meet that 2-mile requirement to good perennial habitat, they must agree to plant a cover crop prior to June 1st, and that cover crop must remain standing until March 15th of the following spring. And we have 3 different mixtures that they can select from. And if we come to that agreement and everything's a go, that producer is eligible for a payment of $400 per acre, which is a foregone income payment on up to 40 acres. And we actually cover 100% of the seed costs for that producer. And yes, that $400 an acre is a large payment, and we realize that, but we wanted to see our producers going to even take us seriously. Is this a viable option? If we can get that cover crop biomass out there on the landscape from June 1st all the way to March 15th, are wildlife going to use it? Is it going to be worth that to us? And is that $400 an acre sustainable for us? No, it's not. And we are actually in conversation with different seed companies like Bayer and Corteva to hopefully partner on a program that would offer these different incentives, whether that be in seed corn isolation areas or just on row crop agriculture that falls within these certain parameters. And for this year, we've actually got 86 acres enrolled in this particular incentive, which we're excited about and we're going to monitor pretty heavily. So I'm sure there'll be some questions about that, which I look forward to fielding. And with that, I would love to take any questions or comments about anything. If there's something you would like to discuss outside of this presentation or this time slot, please feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call or text. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. That was awesome.
So what questions do people have for Nathan, and or vice versa? Like I said, and, or Morgan said, this is an opportunity for you guys just to be able to throw out any questions you may have, kind of, treat this kind of a conversational piece for the remaining portion of the hour.
So Nathan, I have a question for you. On these plots that you guys did, the difference between the use or the benefit to the wildlife between the ungrazed and grazed plots, have you seen a huge difference between that? Or even if you graze them, are the wildlife still receiving significant benefits from these diverse mixes?
Yeah, good question. So you were kind of going in and out there, but I think you were wondering about grazing versus not grazing and still seeing a wildlife benefit. Yeah, so the forage contracts that we've had, so in year one was when we first got in, so March of 2019 was our first forage contract, which actually was across the road from a WMA right outside of Utica, Nebraska. And when the producer went through and swathed that field for the first cutting of forage off of that, he actually sucked up a hen pheasant and went over a hen pheasant nest. Granted, that was July 13th, so I'm sure it was a renest attempt. That was a wet spring, so that hen probably got pushed into that cover crop for the renest attempt. But we did find a hen in there. There were also a variety of small mammals that we saw that went through the swather, unfortunately, a variety of other small birds that went through it. So they are using it. When it comes to grazing, it just depends on how heavy a producer is going to graze that. Just like with anything, are they going to leave enough biomass out there to help? If they're grazing it down to the ground, obviously we're not seeing much of a wildlife benefit after that point. But we are definitely seeing wildlife go in and out of that forage crop while that biomass is still standing out there. And that's kind of one of those things where we're trying to work with producers that, yes, we'll help cost share on this forage crop, but maybe give us an acre or two and we'll still give you that foregone income payment to hopefully keep that benefit out there for a longer period of time. So I'd say it's variable.
And just to follow up, is the benefit to wildlife more the biomass out there or the seeds from those different species going to seed and falling down, or even still being there for those the pheasants and stuff to forage underneath that canopy?
Yeah, great question. I would say that we are interested in both of those. In the fall and into the winter, we're definitely more worried about that biomass, which if that biomass is out there, there's obviously going to be forage resources for them too. So that's definitely a benefit. But in our landscape, after you harvest those corn and soybeans, I mean, there's just not a lot of structure out there. So at that point, we're definitely interested in having that biomass out there for them.
Thanks.
Nathan, I had a quick question just about, I think you said in the first year y'all had 12 individuals sign contracts. How long is that typically the turnover, or do you see people come back for multiple years, or how long is those contracts?
Yeah, good question. So our contracts are 1 year in length. Your second question, we do have a lot of people come back and want to enroll in the program. And I mean, this is honestly one of the better programs that you'll find out there as far as flexibility and the amount of cost share that a producer can receive. So a lot of those producers are coming back again. I mean, I have a producer in year 3 who's still interested in the program. Like for example, we're not going to keep working with a producer if we're not seeing a benefit that we want to see. So we're not just going to give them money to just plant whatever. It has to be a benefit that we're getting from it as well. So for example, a lot of producers who grow seed corn plant cover crops at male row destruction. So in years 1 and 2, we let producers re-enroll in that. those contracts are usually about $8 to $9 an acre total for seed. So we cost share 75% of that. They are cheaper contracts for us, which is great. But now we've put a cap on those, saying that if you have enrolled in that practice, you cannot come back again just because we're not getting that wildlife benefit. Also, we want new producers to come through the door. And if that is the management practice that gets them in our door and starts thinking about other stuff, that's a win for us.
I have a question, Nathan. Thank you for your presentation, first of all. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah. So with regard to the benefits of, having the cover crops, are you also measuring aspects of soil health, like soil carbon improvements or sequestration of carbon?
Yes, great question. I mean, our organization as a whole would love to measure the soil carbon sequestration amounts, but unfortunately, we just do not have the capabilities to do that. And with my position, I'm actually helping out with a lot of the wildlife monitoring in general. So it's just one of those things, what can we afford to do? And honestly, what can we afford to test as well, from just the money that we have and then my time as well. So I am working with Aaron Hurd, the NRCS state soil health specialist, and he actually ran me through I'm trying to think, it's just the Nebraska State Soil Health Assessment. So I'm actually going to be conducting those on our full season cover crop sites, and those that look at infiltration along with a variety of other things. So I will be conducting those this year. I really wish we could look at a variety of other soil health factors. To really do that well, I would want to have producers enrolled for multiple years though.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I also wanted to add, if anyone has any questions that they don't want to ask personally, they can always drop it in the chat to me, and I'd be happy to ask Nathan as well.
I have a question, I guess, for whoever wants to answer. I guess, if you're a landowner, what was your first thought when you heard that $400 an acre incentive to leave cover crops standing? So essentially, you are taking row crops out of production. And if there's other questions coming in, we can definitely cover those before we jump into that.
Having a small acreage, I'm biased because we don't do row crops. So I'm like, I just put it in a diverse pasture myself and not worry about row crops, but I'm not the right person to ask because we don't have crops and we're not set up to do cropping. I think it'd be a totally different response from someone who, that's their main business.
Yeah, and it's definitely a fine line, because I have guys that try coming to me and they're like, well, I have this little brome patch that I think would be great for this. And just to clarify, we do not take perennial habitat and enroll it. It has to be row crop acres. So we're not going to tear up perennial cover for it.
I think there's quite a bit of opportunity relative to the precision ag conservation piece, that producers identify acres that are low productivity and enroll them. And I would think you would here in the western part of the state, have some opportunity to make that sale to them as well.
Not being a pheasant specialist, how much acreage does a pheasant, I don't know how to phrase the question. How much space do they need? I mean, I know they need, their habitat during different times of the year and all of that. I'm just trying to think through. I know that's why you're trying to get it close to those wildlife management areas, but do you kind of have a minimum that you're shooting for in a given area?
Yeah, so Andy, correct me if I'm wrong here. We had this conversation the other day, and what we're saying is that if all those the factors that a pheasant needs are within a 2-mile radius, that would be a fairly you would call that the home range size. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, typically, for a lot of pheasants, and I think you're looking at about it, a square mile or so. It's, kind of on average. And again, yeah, it's all going to be very dependent on the structure of that landscape. You can kind of think about if you have a landscape that has your resources distributed, really, sparsely, and then it's going to, they're going to have to move a lot further to get to those resources. But in general, yeah, kind of that 1 to 2 miles. Pheasants can move, upwards up to, 8 to 10 miles away if they had to, but in theory, that's going to be more of a dispersal movement. So yeah, in general, Nathan, that's correct.
Nathan, I saw a question in the chat from Trent, and he asked, is there a stubble height minimum when harvesting the forage via haying or grazing?
So currently there is not a stubble height requirement. And the reason for that is a lot of these mixtures that we are putting out there with the sorghum sedans or forage sorghums, things like that, they will regrow if they are harvested early enough. So a lot of those producers don't want to cut it below 6 inches because that's just going to hurt them in the long run. But yes, I think that would be something really good to look at in the future, especially for that second forage cutting, if they're going to cut it again for forage prior to fall and winter. So that is not something we have pursued yet, but we have definitely had conversations about it.
And to follow up, Melissa also has 2 questions. She said, thanks for the presentation, first off. The first question is, how are you getting the word about your program out to potential producers? And secondly, what are their major concerns if they are hesitant to participate?
Both great questions. So we do a variety of outreach efforts. We have done cover crop mailings, so targeted mailings, which we've worked with a GIS specialist to identify specific producers based on, their relation to different perennial habitat, what their cropping system actually consists of. So targeted mailings have been one, field days, we put videos out on YouTube working with certain producers and highlighting different projects. The monthly newsletter through Pheasants Forever. So there's a variety of techniques. If I'm going down the road actually, and I see a producer that has small grains out on the landscape and it looks like they're going to take them to harvest, I'll just drive up to the producer's door and have a conversation with them. Sometimes they're a little taken back by it, but if that's what I have to do to get a good quality contract, I'll definitely do that. So a variety of factors. And then what was the second question?
It was asking, what are the main concerns if they are hesitant to participate?
Okay. So a lot of producers don't, I guess the question that I often get asked the most is, does it need to be open to hunting, and will other people be out on my property, mainly for hunting? It's something like that. So this program does not open private property up to any public hunting or any public access. When working with a producer, I do have that conversation with them that we will want to be out in that field doing different monitoring of different things. And a lot of the time they're completely fine with that. One of the other concerns, I guess, was, so for these full season forage contract or cover crop contracts, those producers aren't getting paid until next year. So after March 15th, after we know that cover crop is stood through the necessary time. And obviously they're taking 30 acres out of row crop production there. So they're like, am I going to get paid? Is my money there? And it is. That's already written into the budget. So, just kind of that unknowing, you're not getting paid right away. So that's it hasn't been a problem, but I guess I've had questions about it.
So Nathan, this is Ron Seymour from Adams County. You used an example where a farmer didn't have very good yield on some parts of his land. What were the factors that were contributing to that lack of production on those pieces of ground?
Yeah, so for that area right there, soil type was definitely a problem. It was a very sandy site. Wildlife, deer, I mean, it was right up against the Platte River, so he was going to have deer mowing down the crops there. Weed control was another issue because it would regularly flood and bring in new weed seeds. So, I mean, there were a variety of factors that stacked up, and I mean, really, that probably should have never been farmed anyway. But you know, I'll definitely take those. Putting those back into perennial habitat is good at anything for me.
Trent also had another question asking about producers that graze and if they're weighing livestock in and out of the field to track the average daily gain, and if that might be an extra incentive.
Yeah, that's a great point. We do not require that as of right now, but I mean, that would definitely help. That would definitely help our case for promoting the forage contracts. So that's definitely something to think about.
So Nathan, with my project and research, a lot of it I've looked into the influence of like neighbors and the social like community connectedness idea. With these contracts that you've had over multiple counties, have you seen like the neighbors reach out after they've seen these fields go, switch into y'all's contracts, and like how has that influenced their decisions?
Absolutely. I mean, you always hear of that coffee shop talk between producers, and it's definitely real. And a lot, especially, I've noticed it more than anything else with seed corn producers and the forage producers. So people who have livestock still within my coverage area. It seems like those guys are maybe a little more close knit than just your run of the mill producer. And maybe that's just because they're more of a niche area in this landscape. So I've seen word of mouth really carry through those different contracts. But yes, it's been very powerful.
Is there any more questions for Nathan? Or Nathan, do you have any more questions for the group?
I don't think I have any off the top of my head. Like I said, my contact information's right there. So if you have any other questions or comments or want to discuss anything, please feel free to reach out.
Hey, Nathan, I do have a quick question for you. So, thinking largely about, your position, I know you're focused right now on doing a lot of cover crop stuff, but obviously as a precision ag coordinator, think about, people like, Ryan Henniger, who's director of precision ag over at Pheasants Forever in Iowa. Do you see, producers thinking more about utilizing things like yield monitor data to help them in identifying, consistently marginal areas of fields and maybe kind of thinking about diversifying them? I think just, from a lot of the conversations that I've had with various people that, there is some growing trend, but I think there's also some potential barriers there. So I'm just kind of, what have you seen being on the land, interacting with producers on a day-to-day basis?
So we, in the beginning of my position, we definitely hit that yield monitor data pretty hard and tried to find different avenues to go down with it. And we're definitely still trying, but it's been really difficult because there's not just one program out there that's going to work for every producer that you run into, right? Because I mean, obviously equipment's going to be different, different years of yield monitor data or how it's stored. So that's been a barrier for me to work with guys, because in the end, is it worth my time to learn 3 or 4 different programs and learn them well enough to actually work with a producer and figure that all out for them. So we've kind of, I know, put that on the back burner, I guess you would say. When working with producers, when they first come in the door, I have that conversation. Hey, my end goal is to put stuff back in perennial habitat. And I mean, obviously acres that are marginal ground or something that shouldn't be farmed. And it's kind of funny because that first year they're like, well, I don't have any of that. All my stuff's good farm ground. And then after they get to know me and learn the flexibility of our program and realize that I'm not there to turn their whole operation to CRP, next year or a couple years later, they came up to me or they give me a call. Hey, you know, this corner of the field's unproductive. What programs do you have for me? Or more specifically, there's a producer in York County who called me and said that he didn't want to farm his turn rows anymore. So I got him in touch with a biologist, and we're actually looking at that prairie strips program. And I think he's actually on course to have that seeded this coming fall. So I think more often than not, producers know where their unprofitable acres are or less profitable acres. I think it comes down to building those relationships. And I'm definitely not writing off the software, because I think it's really important, and I wish there would be a software that I could use for everybody, because we definitely would. But that's kind of what I'm noticing.
No, and that's really interesting, because and you mentioned there the Prairie Strips program. So Iowa State, for those who are not familiar, developed it's called the actual Strips program. And basically what they're doing is they're taking about 10% of corn and bean fields and putting those into perennial vegetation. And so they've been doing that research for about 15 years over there. So they have everything from looking at things from, water filtration to wildlife habitat to economics, et cetera. And so, I was kind of curious about that too. If you've had any people, now that that's actually an approved practice in the Farm Bill, people are starting to, get interested in that type of effort or not. Because again, that program can help the producers actually spatially optimize where those strips can be established. They're not necessarily putting them into very profitable acres of the field.
Definitely.
Cool.
Well, Nathan, I just want to say thank you for your time. That presentation was awesome, as Clint noted in the chat. But I wanted to remind everyone before we head off, just to look in the chat for the brief survey at the end, just to give us any feedback or thoughts moving forward. But we appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me, Andy.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan.
Yep, we just dropped that link in the chat for those still on.
Sounds good.
Well, good luck with everything you got going this summer, Morgan.
Thank you. Do y'all ever do I don't know, field visits or anything? Because I talked to Ryan at one point just about precision ag specialist positions and stuff in the future. And I didn't know, with you being local to Lincoln, if that's something I could talk to you about or get more information about at some point.
Yeah. So you're interested in going out on site visits with someone?
Yeah, just to see what it's like and kind of see how Pheasants Forever work in that atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, John McClinton, our biologist based out of the Lincoln NRCS office, I can shoot you his contact information. He would just be somebody local for you. Gotcha. But I mean, I could definitely get you out in front of producers, ag producers too. So I'm definitely not trying to pawn you off here, but you have my contact information, and you can reach out to him if you want. And just shoot me an email and we can definitely get something set up.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, thank you. I know you're in the area where we are focusing a lot of our surveys and stuff too. So it'd be nice to, but thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it again.
Yes, sir. No problem. Have a good one, Andy.
Yep. You too. We'll see you.
Bye, Andy.
Yep. See you. Thanks, Morgan. Appreciate it.